Modern girls who make the rockin' world go round.
Sup bitches? I'm reliably informed that I'm terrible at pimping my stuff. So here I am, pimping my stuff in what's hopefully an amusing way. If you want to interact with me and follow me, you can find me on Twitter at Grimasaur and at Mort_post for official announcements.
So a viewer, Yevgeny Karikiny, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, a chap from Ukraine, asked me why people hate Boris Johnson. Because in Ukraine he's seen as an ally and someone helpful to the Ukrainian cause, and people like him quite a lot. Now, I understand the mindset that you need every ally you can get, but this is kind of ironic because part of the reason that Boris Johnson and his government are hated is because they're dragging their feet over both aid to Ukraine and to sanctions and so forth aimed at Russian oligarchs who use London as their playground, own a great deal of property and launder their money here. The most immediate cause of hatred for Boris Johnson and his government is Partygate, which I covered yesterday fairly comprehensively, and quite a lot of the other reasons as well, although in passing. But you have to remember with Boris Johnson that, as with Donald Trump, many of the reasons that he's hated are also reasons that he's loved by other people. So yeah, really not unlike Donald Trump in that sense. Brexit being the leading example. There are diehards who still haven't quite cottoned on to the fact that it's an unmitigated disaster, and they will support him through thick and thin because they hate foreigners. Or have paranoid conspiracy theories about the European Union. This will turn out to be ironic as well. Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Shagger Johnson was born in 1964 into privilege. Privilege in the actual sense of the word, not the modern sense of the word. Privilege as in an extremely rich and wealthy background where his lack of talent was no impediment to his progress through society. He went to Eton, which is a very posh private school, or public school as we call them here, just to be confusing. This is where the cream of the crop of British society go to be educated. It's an exemplar of the British class system, as is Boris Johnson. Lions led by donkeys, as they said during World War I. So, despite being who he is, going to Eton and then later to Oxbridge University because of money and privilege and position and power, these kind of set him up to be part of the ruling class of Britain, whether he deserved to be there or not. While at Oxbridge, I believe, he was a member of the Bullingdon Club, which was a sort of social drinking club, I suppose, of future politicians of the UK, including David Cameron. To be in the Bullingdon Club, one of the things you have to do, allegedly, is to burn a £50 note in front of a homeless person. And keep in mind, this would have been decades ago when that £50 was worth a lot more than it is now. Ironically, again, because of Boris Johnson's policies. He was Mayor of London for a while, which he used to aggrandise himself, took credit for other people's work, wasted a bunch of money on useless projects, including a garden bridge, and seemingly at least appeared to misappropriate funds for at least one woman who he was having an affair with and to enrich his various friends. Speaking of affairs, Boris is a serial shagger. He has, I think, at least 6 children by different mothers, committing adultery constantly. Normally I wouldn't care, but this forms part of the pattern of lying and not caring about anyone but himself, constantly, over and over again. When it came to the European Union and the Brexit vote, he was kind of talking out both sides of his mouth throughout a lot of it. He had a pair of articles ready to go depending which way the vote went, so that he could take advantage whether we remained or whether we left. Yeah, and he could have gone either way, but he ended up backing Leave, again primarily for reasons of personal aggrandizement, and pushing through that policy at the worst possible time in the worst possible way has done more damage to this country than anything since a war. Living standards are dropping back to 1950s levels. That's how bad things are going. And again, ironically, they always attack Labour for allegedly taking us back to the living standards of the 1970s. Well, the 50s were worse. So, yeah, he didn't actually have a particularly ideological position on this, but he took advantage of the Brexit vote to further his own career, to become Prime Minister, to take over from Prime Minister Theresa May, and to scrap the slightly more reasonable deal that she'd managed to negotiate. So, then he's in power and forces through Brexit, massively harms the country, and then COVID hits. His response to COVID was extremely slow and begrudging, leading to many, many unnecessary deaths, and when rules and restrictions were brought in, he didn't follow them. But yeah, we've covered that. Basically, he's elitist, corrupt, and bigoted. And the affable clown thing, it's an act. He ruffles his hair before he goes on television, and he acts the affable bumbler, stumbling over his words and so on, as an affect to distract from the fact that he's just another venal, nasty Conservative Party member. He's happy to sacrifice his friends and comrades so long as nothing happens to him. He's been embroiled in numerous scandals, besides Partygate, and besides handing money off to a woman he was having an affair with. There was the Downing Street redecoration scandal, spending a huge amount of money taken from rich donors in exchange for who knows what to redecorate Downing Street in a rather extreme and hideous fashion. His policy of levelling up hasn't come through. The idea of levelling up was that money would be invested in the poorer parts of the UK to make them as, or at least relatively more affluent, as compared with the south of England, which is affluent, to try and spread out investment and opportunity and so on around the country. This hasn't materialised, which is likely to cost the Conservatives in the next election, where they made huge gains over Labour, largely due to the xenophobic Brexit vote. He's been fired in the past for lying, fired from the Times newspaper in 1988 for lying, forced to resign from the Spectator because he was trying to mingle his political ambitions and his journalistic ambitions at the same time. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more, so much more. 2004, he was an MP. He was forced to resign from the Shadow Cabinet, where I believe he was Shadow Minister for the Arts, in opposition, for lying about another affair that he had. And there's been plenty of instances where he's been caught lying besides Partygate. To avoid scrutiny of his Brexit bill, he prorogued Parliament, broke up Parliament early, and misled the Queen about that, which people regarded as quite serious. It's just... It's an unceasing tide of bigotry, referring to Muslim women as letterboxes and things. To be honest, that's kind of fair. The resemblance is there. It's just impolitic and not what you expect from your politicians. But he's said other things like watermelon smiles about black people. It's endless. There are numerous articles online which you can find that exhaustively detail every lie, every act of bigotry, every horrible thing that he has ever done. To me, I think the one thing that really exemplifies what a dick Boris is that he was involved in a kind of show rugby match, I believe for charity or something. But this was children, but he took part in it as a photo opportunity, and while he did, he shoved a child into the ground. He doesn't care about anyone but himself, and very occasionally the mask will slip and he will hurt a child or hide in a fridge or be caught lying. But unfortunately, due to our archaic rules in Parliament, you can't point out that someone's lying when they lie. You have to couch it in other terms, and I think this allows him to get away with things. The other problem is that, as with the US, I think much of our politics relies on convention and politeness and decency. So when you get someone who doesn't have that, like Boris, like Donald, the wheels fall off. And these conventions need to be properly legislated. But from your point of view, in the Ukraine, I think the biggest, most important thing to recognise is that he really dragged his heels on the sanctions and on the providing of aid to Ukraine. He's not really an ally. He's being forced to do these things by popularity amongst the British people. But because he dragged his feet, Russian oligarchs were able to move their money, divest themselves of their investments and so on, hide their cash. And so the sanctions that we've levied against those hyper-rich oligarchs are much less effective because of it. Because, frankly, they can't afford to lose London as a money laundering operation. I hope that helps at least a little. Zang.
It's been called misogynistic, racist, a hate group, reactionary. It's been blamed for Trump, for keeping women out of games and technology. None of this is true. If you want the real story, then you need to buy Inside Gamergate.
Turn up the bass, turn up the treble, Texas rockabilly rebel.